Madam Clerk, we have a quorum. Could you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Howard.
Present.
Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Murphy.
Here.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Present.
Alderman Gunther.
Here.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Here.
Chairman Cone.
Present.
6 present. You have a quorum.
Okay, wonderful. So this morning we have a few board bills before us, and I will take up any of those that are from non-members of the committee first. And I believe Alderman Coatar is over there in the corner. So we are going to start with board bill number 195.
Mr. Chairman, is that the Ann Avenue one?
Yes.
Which property?
Correct.
Okay,
2001 through 2003 Ann Ave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
You have more than one.
Yes, I have two. I have one that is in the 7th Ward and one property located in the mighty 8th Ward.
Oh, you're hearing former Alderman Conway.
Correct.
Okay.
But we'll start with mine. Mine's pretty easy. Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is a board bill authorizing 2 years of tax abatement at 80% for a long vacant multifamily building in the McKinley Heights neighborhood. It's an MVAD area. It is right on the corner of Ann and Mississippi. Yeah, Ann and Mississippi. It's been a problem property in the neighborhood for years. It's been purchased by a developer who's done some other multifamily projects in the area. So we're just simply seeking let me tell you what the sale price was. He acquired it for about $60,000, and he's going to spend about $180 in redevelopment costs. There'll be 4 rental units, and I am comfortable with the SLDC recommendation of 2 years at 80%.
Okay, we'll take questions from members of the committee. Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Howard.
So he'll, Alderman, so he'll only have 2 years abated at 80%, and then the rest of it?
0. So it's just a
Zero.
2-year abatement.
Okay, so he will be paying taxes on the assessed value as it stands,
Correct.
but then the improvements will be abated for 2 years, and then he'll pay on the improvements.
That's correct. I imagine the assessed value currently is pretty low. The building's been
Right.
vacant a long
If he
time.
paid 60 for it,
Yeah.
So that's not really giving him much, is it?
No.
Okay, thank you.
You'll have your chance. Excuse me. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Murphy.
No questions, thank you.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've never seen a 2-year tax abatement.
It's a new day here.
The new day. This is, I guess, the wean-off method.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is probably the most challenged part of the 7th Ward, and depending on the project and the reputation of the developer, will sometimes go as high as 10 years, probably not full at this point. But over here, we've been seeing more 5s, and that's for more what will be for sale properties, rehabs that are then being for sale. This being a multifamily rental unit, we thought 2 years was appropriate.
I have no more questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Alderman Gunther.
No questions.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Where is McKinley Heights, Alderman?
McKinley Heights is, I guess, south of Lafayette Square and west of Soulard. It is, if you're going down Gravois, heading south, when you get to Russell, there's that Jack in the Box there.
Sure.
You got Soulard on one side, the other side's McKinley Heights.
Got it. Okay. So it takes up a good amount of real estate.
It's a very densely populated residential neighborhood, very little commercial, couple of schools, McKinley Magnet on Russell, Siegel Elementary.
Sure. Okay. No further questions. Thanks, Alderman.
Alderman, I am curious. My colleague from the 20th Ward, brought up the 2 years at 80%. Am I
Correct.
So? I mean, does this pass the but-for test? I mean, if this doesn't happen, are they still going to continue with the project, or are we just trying to kind of help subsidize this development? I mean,
I think we're incentivizing the development of a very challenged property that needs a lot of work. I've not spoken to the developer recently, couldn't tell you if, without the abatement, if it proceeds.
okay. It seems, I realize it's a new day and we're not trying to hand out, massive amounts of subsidies on properties here, but, 2 years at 80%, just, it seems like, why would we do that anyway? But that's a conversation for another time, I suppose. So I will entertain motions on Board Bill 195.
I make a motion to pass Board Bill 195 with the due pass recommendation.
I hear a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Murphy. Aye. Alderwoman Spencer. Aye. Alderman Gunther,
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg,
Aye.
Chairman Cone.
Aye.
6 aye votes do pass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Next project, and I don't know the board bill number, I apologize.
It's 196,
Okay.
Alderman.
We got to put these on the form here. This is a board bill seeking a tax abatement for 4121 Russell Boulevard in the Shaw neighborhood. And this is seeking a 5-year tax abatement at 80%. This is obviously not in the 7th Ward. It is in former Alderman Conway's ward. He had asked me to co-sponsor this with him, I guess, anticipating his departure. This is a vacant property currently. It was acquired for $130,000. They're going to spend about another $167 on the redevelopment, and it will be a for-sale property. It's in a MVA-C zone.
We'll take questions from the committee. Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Howard,
No questions.
Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Murphy.
So it's currently vacant, and it's been vacant for quite a while. It looks pretty dilapidated.
Been vacant a couple of years.
Couple of years.
Yeah.
And the rest of the block is in good shape, I imagine. I'm trying to picture it.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Wilson on some of these more particular questions.
It's a solid block, but the property itself's been a nuisance and
Right,
in a
right. I
blighted
understand.
condition for a while.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You can't let one house ruin a block.
I can add also, I have a friend that lives over on the 4,000 block of Russell, and, there are a few challenges still left over in that part of the 8th Ward, but by and large, it is very much a very stable block,
place.
yeah. But it's not to say that it hasn't had its own issues. But it's much different than the 20th or 25th Ward. Was that it, Alderwoman?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
Alderwoman Spencer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And do we have the recommendation from SLDC on this particular property with regards to the tax abatement?
Yeah, their recommendation is the 5 years at 80%.
Okay, so this is recommended by SLDC?
Correct.
It says here in the other comments that the prospective developer is acquiring the property for $130,000 and plans to put in approximately $167,000 for a total investment of $197,000. The redeveloper then plans to utilize, to market the property for $350,000.
Right.
Wouldn't that be
297, you're right, I misspoke, 297. So we have 297 into the building, and they plan to sell it for 350, so a profit of 53,000.
I guess they'd like to sell it for 350. I don't know what the going rate of real estate is over in the Shaw area.
Aye.
It's very high.
Okay.
It's very nice. My question, so, and so I assume that this will just kind of go into that sales price, the marketing of it? If SLDC wouldn't mind just kind of explaining the rationale behind it, so we can kind of just have an understanding of how we've come to the...
Sure, I will defer to Mr. Wilson on that.
I'm sorry, I was asking some other...
Thank you, Zach. Mr. Wilson, would you mind just kind of going over the SLDC recommendation for us here?
Yes, was the what was your main question on our recommendation? It was just
Well,
because
just that the Shaw, if you couldn't just explain the rationale behind the recommendation of the tax abatement here on this property.
Well, in the previous tax abatements, we were offering anywhere from 5 to 10 years for Shaw, and we've been trying to ratchet it down quite a bit. So the 5 years at 80 was our recommendation for this block, for this property. In other parts of the Shaw, we've stopped giving out tax abatement.
So are you seeing this particular block needing additional assistance by way of tax abatement, or is there something particular about this that?
The property and the block is not as great as some other blocks in Shaw. That's why we recommend the 5 years at 80%.
Okay.
The 3,600 blocks and 37 blocks of Shaw, we've stopped basically recommending tax abatement for. So the further closer to Tower Grove Avenue we've gone, more likely we'll give tax abatement.
I see. Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Gunther.
No question.
Alderman Oldenburg.
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I make a motion to pass Board Bill 196 out of committee.
Second.
Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Previous
please?
roll.
Any objection to previous roll? Hearing none, Board Bill 196 passes out with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Zach, can you tell me how many more board bills does Alderman Conway have in the pipeline, former Alderman Conway?
Hardly any, mostly
Okay.
1 or 2 at most, but there's still applications, so we would.
I know that we just recently came to terms on incentive reform pertaining to tax abatements, or at least some guidelines around that. So it would be helpful to know how many have been in the pipeline before we pass the resolution.
Okay. Will do.
For the future,
All right, will do.
please. Okay. Is Alderwoman Martin?
Yes, she's here.
Oh, sorry, Donna's head is in the way. We'll hear Board Bill 197, Alderwoman Martin. And just as a caveat, there was supposed to be a committee substitute for this board bill, which we did not receive in advance. We're supposed to have a 24-hour notice on committee substitutes. So what we're going to do is, because this was published for hearing today, we're going to have the hearing so that we can meet the public meeting requirement of the law. But Alderwoman Martin will have a committee substitute available for us so that we can schedule a meeting, preferably before Friday, maybe Friday morning before our board meeting, so that we can get her board bill back out onto the floor. Continue, Alderwoman.
Thank you, Chairman Cohn. So please have patience with me. This is my first go-around. Basically, what is happening here down far South Broadway in my ward, so just sort of picture the southeast corner of the city along the river. Grani, which is the second largest pasta manufacturer in the world, wants to expand, and they want to purchase Apex Metal Finishing's existing property and use that for their expansion with the possibility of adding some jobs. And then Apex Metal wants to basically move a block over and tear down and rebuild a structure on a block that is right now sometimes used for storage, but essentially vacant.
Excuse me, Alderwoman. Do we have handouts for this?
Oh, yes, I'm
from
sorry.
SLDC?
Hang on.
This committee likes pictures.
Here, but she has a committee substitute.
I tried to hand them out, but Gunther told me I couldn't. So you have two companies that have been in the 11th Ward for a long time and in the city even longer, and they both want to expand, both the potential of adding jobs. They're both here to speak to what they want to do, and so I think it's a win-win, and it will bring life back to an entire block that right now is just sort of occasionally sees some storage moved in and out. And, sorry.
Oh.
Okay. And Apex Metal is requesting, and I'm requesting SLDC's suggestion of 10-year tax abatement at 90% assessed value.
All right. Would they like to present their project?
Please.
Yeah.
Mr. Larson? So, Mr. Terry Larson from Apex will go first.
Hello.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Apex Metal Finishing has been a manufacturing facility in St. Louis since 1967. We actually don't manufacture anything. We're classified that. Somebody else makes something, and we put a profile on the surface of the metal, deburr, get it ready for plating, painting, or whatever. We have presently 14 employees now, and we're in the complex with a granary. We've got a really good situation going, and we've had for a long time, where our overhead is minimal and our taxes are really low in that area. The granary wants to purchase our property and pay for our move, and we're going to move about a 3/4 of a mile in the same zoning, restricted K. However, that's the only place available in the Cronolette area for us to move into. So we got to demo a building for about $125,000, and then use the concrete that's there in the foundation and build a 20,000 square foot building on top of that. We're going to be more efficient operation, more efficient building, and we're staying in the neighborhood. Because of our square footage be equal to the same amount we have now, we'll be more efficient because it's going to be in one rectangular box. And we're going to provide, hopefully, a couple other services and have 1 or 2 more employees.
Great. Are there any questions from members of the committee?
I have a question.
Okay, Alderwoman.
Do you foresee any abatement issues in your tear down and move thing?
Abatement as far as?
Environmental.
Environmental?
We've already done phase 1, phase 2.
Okay.
The original structure there was a foundry and a sash company.
Okay.
And actually, both phase 1, phase 2 were clean.
Good.
There's no environmental
Oh, no,
issues
no
at all.
pollutants, yeah. Okay.
Right.
Alderwoman.
Because I was just wondering, because that price, if.
Right, exactly. Everything, right. This is a big deal for Apex. It's going to be a costly move naturally, and we're just trying to do this whole thing without having to go to the bank.
And what other services do you foresee maybe, offering? What other services? Metal finishing?
Okay. Right now, we do mechanical finishing. For instance, one of our jobs, we process 14 million seatbelt buckles a year. Somebody in Arnold stamps them, then Apollo heat treat in the city, they heat treat them, then we deburr them, and then they go off and get plated microfinish, which is on Gratiot Street in the city, and then they get sent down to Mexico and get assembled in different scenarios. So what we are looking at is mechanical finishing with galvanizing.
Okay.
It's not a hot dip or anything like that. It's basically a zinc and a tin, and you tumble parts like we tumble right now in this chemistry, and it's for the fastener industry, utility companies, washers, bolts, and nuts.
Okay, thank you. Those are things we don't think about, but everybody needs.
Right.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Beautiful building. I make a motion.
Well,
we got more
we
testimony.
can't make a motion. This is not the final board bill that we're going to be
Oh,
passing.
okay.
So we'll be scheduling a meeting probably Friday morning so that we can address the committee substitute issue. But did you want to?
I have one more person that came to testify.
Okay, wonderful.
it'll be quick.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lisa Rucker. I'm with Isolgrani, the Apex Metal Finishings neighbor. As Terry said, we are in the process of an expansion ourselves. We are increasing our milling facility from a 1,200-ton mill. We're going to be adding an additional 800 tons a day, and that process has already started. What we are wanting to do is also increase and expand our bagging capability. A lot of our product, our flour, goes out by rail car or pipeline to Riviana Foods, which is next door to us. We have a fairly small amount of product that goes out in bagged product. Right now, because the space is so tight in our area, and we are landlocked by the river and the railroad on the other side, the only other tenant in our area is Apex, so we really don't have anywhere else to go. What we would like to do would be increase our bagging facility from a 4,000 square foot facility to a 30,000 square foot facility to really allow us to reach new customers, different products and that kind of thing. And in order for us to increase our bagging facility and allow for some additional expansion, which we down the road would like to do, we really just need more land, more space. And it's been very critical to us to be able to work with Apex Metal Fishing to help them expand their business and move their business to allow both of us to improve our businesses. So, you know, we're really looking for additional expansion in this area, and it's important to us to be able to continue to grow. So, any questions?
I would actually love a tour. I'm fascinated by these two businesses, and they're just interesting components to the St. Louis economy.
Both of us could talk all day.
And I don't know about all day, but, I represent the area just to the north, so like Virginia and Bates area.
Sure.
So I'm down on South Broadway fairly regularly, actually. Well, not for some nefarious reasons that the Alderwoman and I have to address on South Grant and South Broadway pretty regularly.
I by there today. It's a real issue for space is a real problem. They're putting the big crane up today, and we can't even park in the. We're just totally out of space, and as we're expanding, it's being very difficult.
Well, it's amazing that you two are both continuing to grow in the city, and thank you for coming down here and sharing with us a little bit about your businesses.
We appreciate everything the city's done for us, too. So.
Great.
Mr. Chairman?
Sorry.
I have a question.
Alderwoman Howard.
How many employees do you have?
We have approximately 75 employees in St. Louis, and we have both the grain elevator and the flour mill, and we run a lot of product through there, and you might think we'd have a lot of employees, but it's highly automated, but we run a lot of product.
So you process grain products?
We bring in Durham wheat, primarily from.
Say that again?
Durham wheat. It's a special kind of wheat.
Right.
That's made into semolina flour.
Okay.
And that's used in pasta.
Okay, do you manufacture the pasta, or that goes to a different
No,
facility?
the pasta goes to other facilities. So Riviana Foods, used to be New World Pasta, is right next to us. They're connected via a pipeline. So about 25% of our product goes to Riviana.
Oh.
And we also are the sole external supplier for Barilla pasta in their plant in Ann Ave, New York. So they take about 30% of our volume. The other 45% goes by rail, by truck, by these bags to primarily the Midwest and the East Coast. We don't ship a lot to the West Coast, but we are pretty much throughout the United States. So we have a 4 million bushel grain elevator there that we rail all the grain into, and right now we have 3 million bushels in there.
So does it come to you by barge?
No, it comes in by rail car.
Okay.
We do have barge loading capabilities. Occasionally, some of our byproduct, pelleted mids, we'll ship by barge at certain times of the year, typically in the summer months. Some it goes farther down the river. What we can load barges, but the flour doesn't. It's food grade, it doesn't really go out. And the wheat that we use itself all comes in by rail car because it's loaded in the various areas, and the freight is cheap in by rail.
How many employees do you anticipate in the expansion?
We're thinking somewhere between 8 and 12.
Regional.
We're not exactly sure. We've already hired some of the people because we're in the process of training and that kind of thing. Right now, we're running 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We are at capacity, and that's one of our primary jobs right now is figuring out how we're going to make it until we're up and running, let's say in August of next year, because we are totally sold out and busting at the seams. So it's been a
One more
challenge.
question. How long have you been in business?
Ito Grani bought the grain elevator in 1983, and we finished the mill there in 1986. And to give you an idea, the original mill was about a 400-ton mill. Okay, that original mill's been expanded 3 times basically to 1,200 tons, and now we're adding additional 800 tons. So in that period of time, since 86, 87, we've been through a series of expansions. Our mill is the largest single-unit Durham mill. We couldn't make it any bigger. It's all one big process, and you get any bigger, and you lose your efficiency. So we go to the second mill. We can introduce new products. We can
So you will
be more
be adding a
efficient.
second mill?
This is a totally separate mill, separate building, separate line. So it'll allow us to do a lot of different products and reach a lot of different customers that we can't reach right now.
And you are separate from the pasta company?
We are separate. We are
Now,
separate
are they
from
expanding
Riviana.
also?
I believe they have done some expansion recently, so they've been taking a lot of product, that's for sure.
Okay.
I know I've been eating a lot more pasta lately.
Yeah,
These similar-
everybody eat more pasta.
Be a problem.
I have no more questions, Mr. Chairman.
Alderwoman Spencer, I believe you did.
I just wanted to comment, thank you both for staying in the city. Really glad to hear that. And I just wanted to ask the chair, or the sponsor, if she wouldn't just describe very briefly the purpose of the committee substitute so that we are prepared to move forward in the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The purpose is to, they do want they want to demolish the current structure. So the purpose of mostly of the committee substitute is to be able to demolish that with a cultural resources recommendation to go this path to essentially rebuild what they need.
Thank you, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I do. I'm sorry, Sarah.
Okay. Alderman Gunther.
Just a comment. We've been working with the Telgrani since they probably started that first expansion, and I mean, it's just a stellar organization to work with, and we've been with them this whole time, and it's really great to hear about Apex, because I don't know if you described some of the things they do, but it's just one step of a many-step process for seat belts and a lot of other things, and it's really an interesting company.
I invite you down for a tour anytime. But I also want to add, too, they're both really good stewards to the neighborhood and the ward, and I very much appreciate that. Any other, Dan, you had a question, I'm sorry, or Alderman Gunther.
Thank you. So just looking at like the aerial view and kind of this pictures here, so which building are you tearing down? Are you tearing, like there looks like there's about 5 different buildings?
It's really, it's
The building that we would be
2.
tearing down would be on the east side of that aerial view.
It says tear down in the
Uh,
corner.
There are 2 buildings that are buildings that are on Broadway. One is called Hillco. It's an automotive company, metal fab building, 12,000 square feet. And then the other building that looks like almost like a residential 2-story home that has a monarch butterfly painted on it. So we call it the Butterfly Building. Behind that is 26,000 square feet of brick building, and that's what we'd like to demolish.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Thank you all.
Okay, and as I mentioned, we're going to wait until Friday to have a vote on this bill so that we can get the committee substitute before us. So I hope that we would be able to do that by, we can.
It was ready.
It's ready? Oh, okay. So we just need it disseminated out to the committee with 24 hours notice. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask members of the committee if we could meet at 9 a.m. on Friday. We actually have a new colleague being sworn in at 9:30, so probably would not, the the new alderwoman of the 2nd Ward is being sworn in at 9:30 on Friday. So would you all be available 9 a.m. on Friday?
I think so.
Okay. So, Madam Clerk, if we can schedule that meeting for 9 a.m. Friday to hear Board Bill 197 and take a vote on it, that would be great. Thank you. Okay. And with that, we'll take up Alderman Gunther's Board Bill number 199. You'll get your hair cut, don't worry. Oh. Is Alderman Boyd here?
I saw him for a second.
Oh, him too.
Ooh, thank you.
Oh, yeah. I'm on the wrong agenda. All right.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board here. So this property, 4601 South Broadway, it's a mixed-use building. It's right on the corner of South Broadway and Mount Pleasant Avenue, or Mount Pleasant Street. The current owners of it are they're currently living in the building, but they're looking at opening up some sort of retail shop on the first floor. They are both artists, so right now they have kind of an art studio on the first floor, and then they live up on the second floor. It's as was mentioned earlier, on South Broadway, there's some challenges. This is directly south of the Highway 55 intersection there. So right when you get off of Highway 55 going south, the first thing you see is a Phillips 66, which has its own challenges, and then the next building is this 4601 South Broadway. So Laura and Carrie that are own the building and that are going to do the renovation. They are longtime St. Louisans. They're both founding members of an art project called Artica, which some people may have heard of. So they really want to make this into a space that kind of solidifies the corner of the Mount Pleasant neighborhood. As you can see in the fact sheet here, this is the residential market analysis. It's in the section E. So we're trying to get some development down in the Mount Pleasant. So I would appreciate support. One other thing, it was recommended that the staff supported a 10-year tax abatement, but after talking with the owners, we have recommended a 5-year tax abatement at 100% instead of the 10-year at 80%. So I think 5-year abatement would be helpful for them, and being that they are owner occupied, I think it would be a great building to put back into good use. So with that, I will entertain any questions.
Okay. Alderwoman Howard.
I have no questions. Did this used to be a bar at one time?
That's a question.
I think they did say it was a bar at one time, yeah.
Okay.
There is a very nice bar on the first floor.
Yeah,
Alderwoman.
I would know that.
Me either. Alderwoman Murphy.
Yeah, is there any plans to renovate the facade of the building? Or, looking at it here, I think I know the building, and do they plan to spruce it up a little bit?
Yeah,
Okay.
that is a big part of the renovation that they want to do is repairing the storefront of it. Right now, it just has some small windows in it and a bunch of plywood kind of around it. So they want to bring in more light, open it up, and eventually, if they start out with just kind of an art studio, but then eventually maybe move to like a coffee shop or something of that nature. So they're definitely going to work on the storefront.
Okay, good. Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The buildings across the street, I've noticed, are for sale or have been. Have they been acquired, or is there movement along this whole corridor there?
Mm-hmm. Yes, the building directly across the street is sold. It's no longer for sale. The church has been torn down, and we are working on putting a affordable housing senior center there.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I did hear about that. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Just real quick,
Alderman, do they currently own the building, or are they just? They do. They do, okay. Yep. Okay. So I was just, this is maybe just a question, I'm sorry if I'm dense, or maybe for Dale or Zach, but it says the developer is acquiring the property for $95,000 and plans on renovating.
This is the time of the application they were acquiring.
Ah, I see. That makes perfect sense to me. All right, no further questions. It's a cool building. It's a nice building.
I'm just curious, so are you working with them on facade improvements as well, or is this just going to be tax abatement assistance?
So I put them in touch with our facade improvement person. They are looking at that as well.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Move that we pass Board Bill 199 out of committee with a do pass recommendation.
Second.
Okay, is there a motion for previous roll?
Previous roll.
Any objections to previous roll? Hearing none, Board Bill 199 passes out with a do pass recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, lastly is Board Bill number 198. It's Alderman Volmer's bill, however, he is out of town. I've asked Alderwoman Howard to present it on his behalf. Dale and Zach, you might want to be at the ready, because I'm sure there's going to be questions about it. Dale, Zach, when I say at the ready, I mean by your side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm trying to study fast. Committee, you have before you Board Bill 198, which proposes a redevelopment for 5231, 5233, 5239, and 5241 Shaw Avenue, which is on the hill that backs up to Highway 44. These are two separate townhome developments that will be the same on two different plots.
Correct.
So I would like your approval for this development on behalf of Alderman Balmer. The tax abatement will total $95,011. It is a five-year tax abatement on 100% of the assessed value of incremental improvements, and the second 5 years will be none. So they will be assessed at what the current value is for 5 years, and then after the 5 years, they will pay on the full value of all the improvements. Correct?
Okay. So I would like to caveat this before we question the Alderwoman from the 14th about a tax abatement in the 10th Ward, which is why I'm asking Zach and Dale to be here, because you all are probably more familiar with the background of this than the Alderwoman from the 14th. But, you know, historically, the Alderman from the 10th has been more generous than others with tax abatement, and has given 10 years, and it's even stated in the packet that he requested 10 years for this property. The staff recommended 0, and I've been pretty clear with the Alderman from the 10th that while we were going through our kind of incentive reform, that, you know, he'd need to dial that back to, 5 years. So I think that that's where this is right now. You know, we're doing 5 years at 100%, and then the other 5 years at 0%. My own question is, why is the current assessment so low? if this is an area that is not in need of incentive, why is the assessment currently at $6,000?
It was shotgun homes, and that's basically in a vacant lot, so that's why I guess the assessment would be low.
Okay. So my understanding is that the vacant lot actually had a house on it.
Well, there's multiple addresses, as you can
Right.
see. There's 2 houses on originally, and then vacant land next to the houses, so I didn't know how much of it was added up to the vacant lot was added into the assessed value, but
So is the assessed value based off of the vacant lots that are currently there, or was that the assessed value when they actually had homes on them?
actually homes on them, because they were just demolished
Frame.
recently, in the last month or 2. So
Okay, so
those are
the,
numbers off the assessors.
I just want to be clear because there was actually a Riverfront Times article written, I think today, that said that the assessed value that's being presented for abatement is based off of the vacant properties.
That is usually, developers sometimes wait a whole year until it gets reassessed at the vacant lot, then build. But those homes have been demolished within the last month or 2. So
Correct.
These
So-
assessed values are when the homes were actually on it, so.
Okay. So I just want to be clear for anyone who might be listening or watching that, the assessed values that are currently going to stay in place are based off of when the properties were there.
Correct.
And the buildings were there. It's just that those homes that were there were of a certain value and size that,
Anybody that's familiar with the Hill
Hill.
knows that a lot of these little houses were
Right.
built frame, shotgun, very small, very tight on the lots. So they were probably very economically appraised. So, and that's probably why a lot of the people stayed around, because the cost of living was very, very inexpensive.
right.
So, and, we're upping the ante, and these are going to be very nice and compare. Now, will this be $95,000 for each unit?
No, that's for all
For both?
4 units.
So basically less than 50,000 each
Yeah, divide that.
for all 4, so 20, yeah. So the return on investment is minimal compared to,
When I put the assessed value, I go to the assessor's website and pull that information right off the line at that day. So whatever if the house is on there, that's what the assessed value is going, what I present.
So the houses were there at the last time of the assessment. So the value that's in the website is based off of when there was a house on the property.
Yes.
And the abatement will be based off of that assessed value.
Correct.
Not the value of the vacant lot.
Right.
So, I asked this question with Alderman Conway. Alderman Volmer, how many more tax abatements does he have?
This is the last major one. That's
That's
why.
what I believe he told me last week or the week before, was that this was the last one, that he kind of had conversations with the developer before we went through the incentive reform conversation. So this should be the last one that's coming before this committee that is structured like this. So, okay, well, with that, I'll entertain questions from the committee. Alderwoman Howard, I'm not going to have you question yourself. Alderwoman Murphy.
Just, I guess, a comment more than a question. I'm very familiar with that area, and it's wonderful what's happening up there. It's keeping people in the area. People won't live in those small homes anymore like the immigrants did a long time ago. And this has happened quite a few places. I think that's why that comes up on Alderman Valmer's thing quite a bit. They buy 2 of these lots, tear down the 2 little shotguns that are there, and then build something, larger and more acceptable for today's standards, I guess, or whatever you want to say. So I'm very glad it's happening. Thank you.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So SLDC, even prior to having these incentive reform conversations, is recommending zero tax abatement for this property?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all? Okay. Alderman Gunther?
Thank you. This is exactly what Alderman Cohen was going for, but just to make it clear again here. So looking at the assessor's site, 2016 assessed value was $45,900, current assessed value $8,400. So you're basing this off of the $45,900 assessment,
The 45,
the 2016 assessment.
that says 2,000, I was going off to what they had currently, so
And that's just one property.
I can change that.
Assess, yeah.
The assessment is.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Different than the
appraised
appraisal.
value,
Unless they went to the assessor and negotiated it down, so they challenge that all frequently.
Okay, yeah, and so I think also, you know, kind of following up with Alderwoman Spencer, like we've kind of asked that SLDC look into reforming and asking for some changes, and we've had a whole lot of discussion about abatements being used in places that truly need them, and so I think I will go with your recommendation of no abatement on it. So that's no questions.
Alderman Oldenburg?
So I'm to understand that this was a project that Alderman Vollmer, and this may be a rhetorical question, not necessarily for you guys, but maybe the chairman can answer it because he's had the conversations. But this was a project that I think the alderman had started maybe with the developer a while back.
Correct.
Before we started crafting the metrics around the incentive reform resolution.
Correct.
Okay. So I will just state that, real estate professionals often start these projects in advance. So at the time when they're trying to get their financing and they're planning ahead of time, they want to make a calculus. So I think that they were assuming that this abatement at a level that the alderman probably negotiated with them and SLDC would be there. So while it doesn't feel like there's a bunch more of these in the pipeline or in the hopper, it makes sense to me that we can move forward because I think this is a good project. And I just went by it today, and they're, as a matter of fact, so I appreciate it. No more further questions.
No doubt to get your morning coffee at Shaw Coffee.
You know my routine.
I am familiar with, yes.
Application has actually been for us about a year, so we've been waiting for drawings to be submitted. The application has been with us almost a year, so that's why.
That was going to be my next question for you, Zach. So it's been in the works for over a year with this particular developer. Have you had conversations with the developer over the course of that year relative to the 10-year versus 5-year, the 5-year versus 0, and what they would be able to do with any of those?
I informed their consultant that we would not be supporting tax abatement, and they weren't too happy, and they were saying for marketing purposes, they needed that to sell the house, and that's why they pleaded with the alderman for the tax
So
abatement.
would it be appropriate if we did a 5-year at 80%? I mean, is this a situation where the developer is not going to do the project?
Well, the houses are demolished already. I don't know
Correct.
how far along the construction is, but we recommended 0, so Alderman Vollmer thought 5 years would be enough, but it's really up to you guys.
I'm struggling to remember. We had a situation like this with Alderman Vollmer earlier this fall where LCRA recommended 0.
He did one for 5 years at 75, then the second year's 5 years at 50%. So this is
Okay.
less than that. This is 5 years
It's
at
5
100%.
years, but it's 5 years at 100% and then 5 years at 0%. So this is,
He is coming down.
Yeah, he's coming around. Okay. Any other questions from the committee? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion on Board Bill 198.
I move we pass Board Bill 198 out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
I'll second.
I know that we're not going to use previous roll on this. Madam Clerk, can call the roll, please.
Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Murphy,
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer. No. Alderman Gunther,
No.
Alderman Oldenburg,
Aye.
Chairman Cone.
Aye.
4 aye votes, 2 no votes.
Okay, with that, Board Bill 198 passes out with a due pass recommendation. Like I said, we're going to take up Alderwoman Martin's board bill for a vote on Friday morning, so I will see you all then.
Usually wait till everything.
And with that, the meeting of the Neighborhood Development Committee is adjourned.
Thank you.
Excellent.